Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tish Powell. I am the manager of municipal sales with Republic Services. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon, and thank you for your patience. We're just telling Stan I had to get my car towed. Yes, please, sympathy. So just was trying to juggle a couple things to make sure I got here today. So I am here, yay. Really excited about being here as part of your first Sustainability Day. The City of Elmhurst has been a partner with Republic Services for a number of years. So I'm going to walk through this presentation. I promise I'm not going to be one of those people that's going to read you the presentation word for word, because I know that's pretty irritating. So I really kind of want this to be interactive. Already introduced myself. I've been in the industry for probably about 20 years, primarily on the public sector side. I've worked for the city of Elgin for a number of years doing waste management, recycling, and sustainability work, and currently sit on the board there. And prior to that, I'm a Michigan native, so prior to moving to Illinois about 20 years ago, yay, another Michigander, I worked for the city of Kalamazoo doing very similar work. So this is very, very near and dear to my heart, and I've earned the name of Trash Diva from folks that I've worked with for a long time. So Republic Services, we have been known by a number of names, Allied, BFI over the years, but overall, we're an industry leader in environmental services, waste management, and recycling. We are the second largest waste management and recycling company in the United States, and a leader in providing municipal solid waste services. Our values are safety, being committed to serve, environmental responsibility, being driven, and being human-centered. This slide just kind of gives you a really broad overview of our business. 5 million average daily pickups a day. We do nationwide, 13 million customers, about 39,000 employees, and we have the 5th largest vocational fleet in the country. It's a whole lot of trucks. Some of our awards, some of which, obviously look familiar, great place to work, but one of the ones I'm probably most proud of is the Most Sustainable Companies Award by Barron. We've gotten that for the last couple of years. Republic Services is also known for giving back to the communities where we serve. We have impacted about a little bit over 5 million people during the course of between 2019 and 2022, giving back over $12 million in foundation grants in our communities. As I mentioned earlier, we've been a local partner with the city of Elmhurst since about 2013. Our facility that services the city of Elmhurst is based in Melrose Park, so it's a mere two and a half miles or so from Elmhurst. We have about 110 municipal contracts in the state of Illinois and about 2,400 employees in our area, in our region, including about 250 employees that work in our local division. We operate 10 recycling centers that process about 490 tons of material each year and have 4 active landfills that power over 37,000 homes a year out of our region. This slide gives you an overview of some of our sustainability goals. I talked about charitable giving, incident reduction, safety obviously is big for us. Our circular economy, I'll get into that a little bit later, and renewable energy as well. I also want to point out, we have a very robust sustainability report. It's brand new, it's for last year, just came out a couple months ago on our website. I highly recommend that you go there and download it and take a look at it to really get a good overview of some of the sustainable things that we're doing. It's available at our website at republicservices.com. And we're going to get into a few of our sustainability initiatives before I start talking about some of the things that we're doing here in Elmhurst. Expanding our renewable biogas industry. We recently expanded this business, made about a $1.1 billion investment to do about 39 projects at landfills that we have across the country in 19 different states. And that is going to allow us to recover even more gas and turning that into electricity. So locally, where our trash here that is picked up in Elmhurst goes, it goes to Livingston County Landfill, which is in Pontiac, Illinois. And that facility is already a gas to energy facility. And that facility powers about 9,000 homes currently. So I always like to bring that up to at least let you know that your garbage is being turned ultimately into something renewable. Another exciting nugget that we're undertaking as Republic Services is fleet electrification. One of the big things that probably came out within the last 10 years is CNG, compressed natural gas vehicles. Those are great, and we do have some of those in our fleet, not locally because of the infrastructure required to fuel a lot of those, but we're really moving towards electric vehicles, and we are testing some of those in different parts of the country, moving to an electric fleet. We find that it's more sustainable than CNG, and hoping to really see that move forward within the next 5 years. One of the other things that we're doing is really moving towards being more of an environmental services company. We recently formed an environmental services group. Earlier this year, we acquired US Ecology, which is a company that specializes in hazardous waste collection. So it really gives us a better ability to service municipalities like Elmhurst and neighboring towns when it comes to household hazardous waste events, electronics, universal waste, disaster response, et cetera. And probably one of the more exciting things that we have coming up next year is the launch of our Plastic Polymer Center in Las Vegas, which is going to be the first fully integrated plastics recycling facility in the nation. What does that mean? It means that materials that are picked up from the curb are going to be taken to this facility, and they're going to come out as a bottle. So it will be fully integrated in terms of taking all of this material in, flaking it, and actually making it into new bottles. It's really to help feed the need and feed the demand for high post-consumer content material that folks like us typically look for when we're buying plastics, when we have to buy plastics. So let's talk about the juicy stuff, Elmhurst's program. So Elmhurst has what we call a modified volume-based program. It provides residents with a whole lot of flexibility in terms of what size container you have and based on what your needs are. So you can choose a 35, 65, or 95-gallon refuse cart, and you pay a set fee to the city for that. Anything over and above that, if you have extra bags of trash, if you have bulk items, then you have to buy the stickers. You also have an annual amnesty day that takes place in April, which is a very popular program where people can get rid of stuff without stickers. Lots of folks take full advantage of that program. And you also have weekly recycling, which is included in your refuse rates. And you get a 65-gallon cart for for your recycling. Yard waste and organics options runs weekly, April through November. Prepaid sticker is required on all your bags of yard waste, or if you're using like a can that's marked for yard waste, you have to put a sticker on it. Or you have the option of subscribing to the 65-gallon cart for a fee. And not a whole lot of people we're finding are using the 65-gallon cart for a fee, but I am hearing from folks that there are people that are definitely using the food scrap recycling program, but they may not necessarily be using the cart. They may just be using the bags or their own cans, which is fine. I just caution sometimes around what people are putting in there that may end up attracting some critters, but we'll get into that later. So recycling, this is what I get more questions on than anything. Can I recycle this? Why isn't this recyclable? Can I put this in my bin? Do I have to remove all the peanut butter out of the jar? Give it to the dog. Dogs do a great job removing all the peanut butter out of the jar. So we try to keep it simple. First, just know what to throw. Flattened cardboard, paper, plastics, cans, glass. Just try to keep it simple. Keep it empty, clean, and dry. That's the hardest part for a lot of people. I can't tell you how many times when I'm going out on audits and folks who I believe definitely have the best of intentions put that greasy pizza box in their recycling cart with the cheese and the pepperoni still stuck on it. Not recyclable. And don't bag it. Can't tell you how many times we're pulling bags, those icky plastic bags, out of folks' recycling carts because they figure, oh, I need to put it in a bag and keep it separate. It just needs to go loose in your can because those bags are a problem at the recycling center. They get caught up in the equipment and cause a lot of problems. So going into a little bit more detail about what you can recycle. Paper, your office paper, your printer paper, envelopes, junk mail, magazines, the newspapers, the Post-it notes, and no, you don't have to take all of the windows out, and no, you don't have to take all the staples out. Just put it in your cart. Aluminum and steel cans, try to provide some neat examples of things, and that is really looks like what my recycling looks like at home. My recycling is very neat, just like that. Don't believe that. Plastics. People always ask me about numbers because that's the way we were taught about recycling 20 years ago, and the numbers change. Excuse me. The markets change on this a lot. So the big numbers right now that really do have solid recycling markets are 1s, 2s, 4s, and 5s. 6s are your or the styrofoam, which we never really took because that's different. 7s aren't very common, and the 3s aren't very common. The majority of your plastics are in that number 1 and number 2 section. That's going to be your liquid laundry detergent bottles, your water bottles are number 1 plastics. If you look at your plastic numbers that you're generating at your house, the vast majority of them, I would say, are in the number 1 and number 2 category. Flatten all of those Amazon boxes. I call it the Amazon effect. Holy cow, the amount of cardboard that has been generated during COVID while everyone was getting everything shipped at home, out of this world. You gotta flatten it though. Make it easy, just put it next to your cart and we'll pick it up for recycling. Getting back to the whole empty, clean, and dry, your cereal boxes, things like that, in your, I'm just thinking about stuff in my pantry, all of that stuff can easily go in your recycle cart. and the clean glass bottles and jars. So this list is probably a whole lot longer than the other list of the things that shouldn't be in your recycling cart. And trust me, these things are here because these are things that we find in recycling carts. The styrofoam, the Tyvek envelopes, styrofoam cups, tissue paper. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but obviously the nasty plastic bags and pouches. One of the things that is a really big problem that people end up putting in their trash and their recycling containers are the lithium-ion batteries. They are highly flammable, highly flammable. I was going to do a slide of a truck we had that caught on fire that we suspect was from a lithium-ion battery, but I figured I'd spare you that. Very much a problem. People put those out in their recycling bins, they put them in their trash containers. They ignite with all of the other stuff that's in the truck. And when we have a truck catch on fire, you know what happens? They literally have to dump their entire load out on the street. Now, we do clean it up, but for safety reasons, obviously, we try to dump that somewhere where there's no overhead wires and things of that sort, but it's a huge problem. It is a huge safety issue. 9 times out of 10, if there's a fire at a recycling facility or at a transfer station, a lot of times it's batteries, or people have improperly disposed of other flammable liquids like gasoline and other chemicals that shouldn't go in the trash. Another thing that we keep finding in the recycling bins and carts are propane tanks. Those are a no-no. Needles. There's all kinds of programs out there to properly dispose of needles. And no, it's not putting them in a milk jug and tying it up and then putting it in your recycling or trash container. Needles are a big problem. So I asked one of our recycling managers, what was the strangest thing that ever came across the line at the recycling center? He told me a horse saddle. Not exactly sure why someone thought that a horse saddle belonged in the recycling cart, but that was probably the strangest thing, he said, that came across the recycling line. So a couple of things that we've been doing and are in the process of doing, we just extended our contract for another 3 years with the city of Elmhurst. Yay, we're excited about that. We're working on putting together a new program guide because the one that's out there is probably pretty dated, and really wanted to re-emphasize some things that we're hearing from your community that people need more education on. So we're putting that together, look to have that out in the next couple of months. But we partner with the city, obviously. We are the service provider for Elmhurst Public Schools and Elmhurst Hospital and a host of other businesses throughout the community. So we can keep a consistent message when it comes to recycling and waste reduction in the community. Getting geared up for our annual Pumpkin Smash event. I see Kay in the audience. That's big. That's a whole lot of fun, and Elmhurst has a container for pumpkin smashing. And then we did something new this year that I was pretty excited about. We worked with the Craft Beer Festival committee to make that event a more sustainable event. I have a couple pictures from that. So we worked with the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation, the Beer Fest Committee, Cool Cities Coalition, and the Elmhurst History Museum on providing containers on the front end and the back end of this event. So on the back end, for all of the craft brewers, Obviously, their beer is coming in either glass or aluminum cans. So we worked with them to make sure they had containers, recycling containers, where they can recycle all of those empty containers once they're finished pouring. We also captured, and I'll show you some pictures of those later because those are kind of new for me, the beverage carriers, the plastic beverage carriers. Plastic film that was generated at the event was also recycled. So this is just kind of an idea of how many containers we had out there. Kudos to the crew. You can see the signage. We really put a lot of thought and effort into making sure there was clear signage for folks, because we think, again, a lot of times people do want to do the right thing, but you really just need to be very clear about what goes in the container and what shouldn't go in the container. And it seemed to work very well. Had the trash and recycle containers out, obviously on the front end where patrons were. An idea of some of the material that we were able to capture, whole lot of cans, and some of the cardboard. This is so cute. I love this. It looks almost like the pieces from like Checkers or something. But these are the beverage container holders. And I guess I'm getting old because this is not what I remember a beverage container holder looking like. I'm picturing like the old 4 and 6 ring plastic thing, but I guess this is the new thing now. So there were some volunteers that captured all of this and took that for recycling. We can't take it in our program, but just because, I always tell people all the time, just because we can't take it in our program does not mean that it's not recyclable somewhere. The annual Pumpkin Smash event, and I brought that up earlier, is something that Scarce does all over the region. We partner with the city of Elmhurst for, goodness, since 2015, putting that event on. And we've collected over 31 tons of pumpkins here in Elmhurst alone during those events. The other question that comes up a lot is, where does it go? What happens to all of the stuff that's picked up in our program? Good question. Goes to a recycling center. And obviously it gets made into a variety of different things. PET plastic, which are your water bottles typically, are very commonly made back into textiles, padding for carpet, insulation, and bags. The number 2 HDPE bottles, which I call them like the Tide laundry detergent bottles, they get made into new bottles. Also flower pots, buckets, things of that sort, film, sheeting. Number 5 plastics get made into brooms, brushes, auto battery cases, more flower pots. Obviously, cardboard gets made into more cardboard boxes, paperboard, paper towels, writing paper, things of that sort. The big brown craft bags that you buy for yard waste disposal. Same thing with the cardboard and the mixed paper, more liner board, more cereal boxes, cellulose insulation. I've actually seen a lot of that actually marked as being made from recycled paper. Steel and glass containers get made into more glass bottles, more food containers, more steel cans. And I think there's a statistic that from the time you recycle an aluminum can in your recycling cart, it takes an average of 60 days for that can to be processed and actually recycled and made into another can. So it's a really quick process, at least with the aluminum cans, because that's definitely something high in demand. Curbside organics. I figured this is not the time to tell you about my failed attempt to have a worm bin, but we'll probably just talk about that later. But I have had better luck with food scrap composting. So let's talk food scrap composting. These are all the different types of items at the top that you can put in your yard waste carts, bins, and bags here in Elmhurst. Your coffee grounds, fruit and vegetable peelings, your yard waste. All of those different things can easily be recycled for compost. Things at the bottom, not so much. Wouldn't put those in there. Those are not compostable. Even, unfortunately, at this point, even some of the cornstarch utensils that people buy that say they're compostable are not necessarily compostable in our programs. That's more, I call it the California thing, where they do composting a little bit differently inside, and the heat and the temperature of the compost piles gets a whole lot hotter, and that stuff is able to break down a lot quicker. So we are not at this point able to take those types of things in our program. But hey, the system keeps evolving. So I just say no, not right now, but who knows, in the next couple of years, that could change. Also, remember I said earlier about things I would definitely avoid in your compost piles? Meat and bones. There are some programs that accept meat and bones. We try to steer away from that for a couple of different reasons. For you as a resident, unless you have a card, and if you're putting it out in like a bag or something, it could potentially attract critters. They're the smell of the meat. And also, not all of the compost facilities here in Illinois are permitted to take meat and bones. So if we have to change where we are taking something, we want to make sure that we're not taking something that they can't accept. So in terms of where does it go? Several permitted compost facilities here in the greater Chicago area. Our stuff currently goes to, I believe it's called Thielen, up in Antioch. They take all of our yard waste. So that's everything in a nutshell. I thought I would leave some time for questions. There's already a question in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Most of what you were talking about is cans and things that you put curbside.
Yes.
Recycle. That would be for residential that we're speaking about. For commercial or let's say our apartment buildings, you have a different rate for the recyclables. You don't have just one bin and it's all inclusive in the garbage pickup. It's different for the apartments, condos and stuff.
Yes, it can be different at the apartments and condos. What I've most commonly seen at apartments and condos is you'll have like a dumpster for trash, and then you'll have the carts for recycling. Now, in that case, the same thing that we take in a curbside program, you can put in those carts there. And some of the businesses are set up like that as well. Other businesses, because they generate a whole lot of cardboard, they may have an actual dumpster just for cardboard. But if they have other items like the plastic, glass, metal, we usually will give them a cart for that.
So the question was though, if, let's say a condo or apartment building wanted to use services from the public, then there's a different rate
Yes, yes, because the rates, well, and I didn't have rates on here. This is just for the residential program that we contract with. For the apartments, they're not covered under the city's program, so that would be quoted by one of our salespeople separately. But it is available,
Thank you.
to answer your question.
I also have one more ad.
Sure.
I try to be more conservative, so I noticed that there's cardboard and paper laundry and cleaning materials, so you don't have to use all the plastic containers or wash them out when you have to throw them. So do you encourage that?
Encourage,
There's products that you can buy that are inside of a cardboard box.
yep,
And inside, the actual soap is onto a like paper material. So you just put it in the water and it dissolves and turns into soap. Either the laundry or the mop and bucket. So it's totally recyclable because the paper is dissolved in the water already with the soap.
right, and then it sounds like it comes in a cardboard box,
Yeah,
which
no
is,
plastic whatsoever.
yeah, plastic is evil.
Yeah. There's also one more thing, I have a question, that's it.
Yes.
When you're recycling the Amazon boxes or any shipped boxes, do you have to take the tape off before you throw it away? Really?
No.
All that work effort I had.
Nope,
Good to
you
know.
don't.
Can you repeat that for the camera?
Oh. You don't have to pull all the tape off of your Amazon boxes. Now, if you're like the lady in back and you do it, that's great, but you don't have to.
Yay.
Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of paper, can you clarify, if you've got newspaper or magazines, things like that, is it okay to just throw them loose into your recycling container with everything?
Absolutely.
So we don't have to put them
Nope. Oh.
I use disposable contacts that come in a little correct number on it, but they're small. Does small little things make a difference in recycling?
Good question. So the rule of thumb is anything smaller than like a credit card probably shouldn't go in your recycling bin because it probably won't get picked up by the sorting equipment. So what you're describing, and I think I know what you're talking about, that you put your contacts in, that's probably going to be too small.
The daily ones coming up with their own plastic things. And then, for compost, if you buy compostable coffee things, are they really compostable in your system?
You're talking about the Keurig ones?
No. Well, Keurig doesn't say they're compostable, but a
Okay.
whole bunch, when you're buying coffee, it says this.
Typically not. Now, your coffee filters, like if you're old school like I am, and I just have, the old coffee maker where I put a filter in my coffee, that is completely compostable.
My coffee grounds go in my hydrangeas, so.
Ah. That's probably why yours grow and mine don't.
And do you work with Amazon you're a big company. Do you give suggestions to Amazon? I mean, their boxes are smaller, they're not putting little things in huge boxes anymore. Do you have any weight with Amazon?
Not me personally, but I'm sure somebody at our corporate office does probably work with them. We're on a number of committees, the National Waste and Recycling Coalition, SWANA, the Solid Waste Association of North America. So as a major waste and recycling and environmental services company, we work with other companies and municipalities and other government agencies to get together and try to solve these problems in a way that works well for everyone. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we've heard stories from people who live in, like, senior housing and that sort of thing, that if a plastic bag of, a plastic bag full of material is found in a recyclable dumpster, that is immediately diverted to landfill and doesn't go to recycling. Does that happen with what you pick up? I mean, if you pick up, recyclable material and material that's in a recyclable bin that's all in plastic bags, then does that go to your recycling facility, or is it ever diverted to landfill?
No, typically what happens if the driver, because we have cameras, if the driver goes to empty, and this is like on the commercial side for like a business, which is kind of like, I'm assuming at that senior center, they probably have dumpsters. When the driver goes to empty that dumpster of recyclables, and if they see it has trash in it or something in there that's not recyclable, they won't dump it. They'll take a picture of it, and then the owner or whoever, whatever business that is, will typically get notified, hey, you've got a problem. We're not servicing your container until you clean it out. Unless they tell us to just dump it as trash, we wait until they clean it out so that we can dump it as recycling. But some, unfortunately, have put so much trash in the container, they say, yeah, we're not going to clean that out. Just come back and dump it as trash, and then we have to charge them for that. We have some pretty hefty contamination fees when that happens. So there's definitely a financial incentive for businesses to not do that. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard different things where you should take off the aluminum lids that come on glass jars. I've heard that you should take those off, leave them on. I've heard two things. Does it matter?
So I'm a little stickler. I take mine off because they're two different types of material. Realistically, what's probably going to happen, because it's glass, it's going to get broken off anyway, and the metal is going to get picked up by the magnets in the recycling facility. So I always tell people and advise people to, if it's a different commodity, if it's a metal a metal lid on a glass container, take that off.
The metal lids aren't recyclable, right?
They typically are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those will get picked up. Yep, those will get picked up by the magnet. Now, I also get questions about these. Both of these are plastic. It's fine to leave these on. If you take this off and stick it in your recycling bin, it's going to get lost because it's so small. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, you have your do's and don'ts. In Florida, on the recycling bin, they have a label across the top that's printed so everybody knows. So, because there's only so many people here, and there's a lot more that don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, are trying to do the right thing, they just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wondered if you consider that.
Yes. I found out recently that we have the ability to actually order lids that have that hot stamped on our recycling lids. There's been some question about whether or not we want to do that, because as markets change and things change, you don't want outdated material on the recycling cart. But I think if we keep it really basic, I personally think it's a good idea. So we're looking at doing that as we have to, order new containers. We actually tried putting stickers on top of recycling containers, but obviously we live in Illinois with the weather and the snow and everything. They don't weather very well. So good point.
Even if it's on for a few months, at least the information is out there.
Yes, and it's right there where people need to see it. I agree. Yes, sir.
Do you handle anything like mechanical, like air conditioners or heaters or outdated electrical devices and separately, or
Yeah,
program for that?
yes, typically that would be considered under our bulk items and white goods. And you would have to put a couple stickers on them. Anything with the Freon in them, a lot of times we ask that you try to get the Freon removed from them first. But we do take all of that stuff. I mean, that is if the scrappers don't get it first. Typically they get it before we do. But if you have something unique like that, just call the customer service number and let them know, and then we can schedule getting it on your service day. Yes, ma'am.
We've been crushing our aluminum cans, but I had heard that you're not supposed to do that because once they're crushed, they're too small and they create problems. What's the best way to handle aluminum cans?
Just throw them in the cart.
Don't
I mean, unless you're trying to do some kind of special stress reliever exercise, you don't have to crush them. Not to my knowledge, but unless, I mean, I would assume, I mean, I'm just trying to picture how big that is once you crush it. If it ends up being something pretty small, but it's still metal. It's going to get picked up by the magnets at the recycling facility. Mm-hmm.
I try not to use plastic bottles, so I use my refrigerator with filter, and I use my thing with the filter, but those filters aren't recyclable, or are they?
Not in our curbside program, no. Yes, sir.
I was curious about the compostable yard waste. You mentioned it goes up to Antioch.
Yes.
And then what do they do with it there, and where does it end up going?
Good question. So they put it in windrows and let it decompose. They turn the windrows every now and then. My favorite part is, this time of year we get a lot of pumpkins. If they don't turn it really often, I used to manage our compost facility for the city of Elgin, and I would go out there and there would be pumpkins growing in the middle of the compost piles. So that's where I got my pumpkins every year. So yes, they turn it, it decomposes, they screen it, so it's a really nice fine material, and they sell it to landscapers, and I believe they may actually even, I can't speak directly for them, but I know that a lot of compost facilities either sell it to landscapers for landscaping purposes. Some even bag it, and it ends up in stores for retail purposes.
I'm curious about localizing that process,
Mm-hmm.
because you kind of touched on other examples of how things are getting localized with that facility in Las Vegas, for example. When you think about the energy that it takes to take all that material up to Antioch,
Yep.
process it, and then redistribute it, are you, at your company, or are there other folks that are thinking about localizing that process so that less energy is consumed just to move the material?
Absolutely, because, I mean, I don't have to tell anyone in here, the price of gas is not cheap, and the price of moving that material, whether it be trash, recycling, or yard waste in big semi-trailers, is not cheap either. So it is definitely to our advantage to try to find a more local place. We were using a more local spot, but unfortunately they closed down for whatever reason, and that's why we ended up in Antioch. Yes, ma'am.
The greasy pizza box situation, can it be compostable?
Kinda, sorta, but not really. I would say no. No, unfortunately not. But I tell people with the greasy pizza box, it's usually only grease at the top or grease at the bottom. I tear off the part that doesn't have all the grease and stuff stuck to it, and I put that in my recycle cart, and I throw away the lid that has all the stuff on top of it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering about our almond milk that's in a carton and a plastic top. Does it matter? Should we not,
You just shouldn't drink almond milk. I'm just kidding. Those come in what we call aseptic containers, which are the gable tops, whatever you want to call them. Those are recyclable in your program. So again, just rinse them.
and then put the top back on?
Yes.
That's what we were
Now the market for them isn't really big. I will say that, and there isn't a whole lot that we get, but it is something that we currently take in the program. Yes, ma'am.
Michael, a totally different route on my question. So, it's kind of been in the news for a while and hanging around about plastics and recycling and maybe only 5%, there's a new Greenpeace report out. Can you speak to what percentage of plastics is recycled locally, for this area or community? You know what I'm talking about?
I've got some data somewhere, probably not up here, on how much is picked up in your local program, but not specifically plastics. I have kind of like more aggregate data in terms of how much recycling is picked up here. But I will tell you that one of the main reasons why Republic Services isn't investing in the Polymer Center is because the amount of plastics that are actually out in the environment and that are sold, a very small percentage of that actually gets recycled. We need to figure out a better way of how to reclaim that material because that's not happening. And I want to say I saw a data point that maybe it was probably less than 30%, probably less than, it was probably more like 20% of the plastics that are generated are actually recycled nationwide. It's pretty low. So we all kind of need to do a better job of finding alternatives. I mean, I always, preach source reduction first and reuse first, it's recycling last. Maybe I don't have to buy, the whole case of water. I have tons of reusable water containers at home. Just take that, plan ahead. So that reduces the amount of plastic that I'm generating in the first place. Now, when you're dealing with high school kids like I have and football teams and they want you to bring cases of water because that's what the boys need, it may be a little bit more of a challenge. But I do know that the amount of that material that is being reclaimed nationwide is pretty low.
I'm just kind of curious from what's actually collected, what percentage actually gets recycled?
A pretty good amount of it. And I think it really varies. Last I heard, most really good and legitimate recycling facilities have a residual rate of probably less than 10%. But a lot of that is, based on education and what are we getting out to people so that you're not putting the wrong thing in your recycling cart so that it ends up having to be thrown out when it gets to the recycling bin. The other thing that we're working on operationally, and it's probably going to tick off some residents, but if the driver gets to the house and he opens the cart and sees stuff in there that really isn't, that the majority of the stuff that's in the cart is not supposed to be there, it's not recyclable, tag it and leave it. That's the best way to get people's attention and make sure that they're not putting the wrong thing in there week after week, because we're sending the wrong message if we keep picking it up. You think, well, you've been picking it up for the last year. I've been putting the same thing in my cart. I thought it was recyclable. You never told me that it wasn't. You just picked it up every week. So we need to tweak, I think, a lot of what we're doing too. But obviously, before we do something like that and tick everybody off, I'll have to have a chat with Stan first. Make sure that the city knows. But those are things that we have done in other communities, and it's been well publicized where, we might tag it and leave it, or tag it and still take it the first couple of times, and then the third time we tag it and leave it. That has made a huge difference in some communities in terms of really being able to control the rate of contamination in their recycling carts. Yours doesn't seem to be as bad, so that's probably why we haven't embarked on something like that here. But I know in some communities, people were using their recycling carts basically just as a second garbage can, and that was a problem.
I
Yes.
noticed on one of your slides, you had it, and I've noticed it myself, that 40% of garbage is actually food waste.
Mm-hmm.
But your compost is only from April to November, which I guess coincides with lawn waste. Is there any benefit in having that year round?
We get that question a lot, and I know that that question came up when we were renegotiating your contract with the village, with the city. So there are some facilities that are open year-round and some that are not. The big issue around being able to run a program like that year-round is volume. How many people are actually going to sign up for service during the winter months? Because it's pretty costly to run that truck and driver for only a handful of homes. When we see how much that costs, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I'm probably not really interested in paying that. One thing I've told people, because we do live in Illinois, if you have a cart and you want to compost, I would actually just put it in one of the paper yard waste bags and put it in the cart. And it's going to freeze because we live in Illinois. By the time it unthaws, we're going to be picking it up again. So, you know, you've kind of saved all those greenhouse gases, you know, in terms of us having to send another truck out to pick up maybe 20 or 30 homes. But I know that there are some private companies, little small mom and pop companies that are doing food scrap composting and pickup, and they do it year round, but it's not cheap.
Is wood boards go on garbage?
Wood boards, like, typically, yes. We usually ask that, building material and things like that be stacked and bundled, so we can just grab it. It's probably, you'd put stickers on it. Unless they're small enough to fit in your cart.
I don't know that much garbage. I compost and recycle. Although when I looked at Florida and everybody's entire house was in front of their house, I'm like, why am I worried about this piece of paper when houses at the hurricane area had everything in their house? That must have been a nightmare for those companies.
And those people. Yeah. Well, I am getting the signal to wrap up. But thanks so much for having me, and I'll leave some cards and some recycling information here in case folks are interested. And I even have some handy dandy reusable bags. Those you can't have enough reusable bags. So I'll leave some of those here. Feel free to help yourself.